Hi, everyone. Here we are for our Q&A. And this week, we got a lot of questions that really all kind of centered around one main question, I want to say. So we kind of like put it all together in one main thing, which is, what if I really want to change my internalized beliefs, but they still feel so true? Good
Yeah,
question.
it is a really good question. And that's what makes it so hard, right? Is that we believe these things, we've internalized them for so long that they do feel like truth. So the first step is to be aware of other perspectives or maybe an expanded perspective of your truth, right? So rather than, like we were talking about on the live the other day, rather than um, trying to make it the opposite, because I think that's the instinct a lot of the time, is like whatever the internalized belief
Hmm.
is, if it's maladaptive or if it's negative or if it's not, counterproductive, then the instinct is to just flip it and make it the opposite. That's not what we're doing here. We're just expanding your idea of what is true to include then truth that serves you better. So that's the first thing, is just think of it as like expanding, um,
Hmm.
and thinking about, well, that might be true, but something else can also be true, and then kind of directing yourself over there. The second thing
Absolutely.
that I would say is be really aware of your social conditioning in respect to the internalized belief. So if you say, well, it just feels true that that beauty equals skinny, let's say, for example, talking about beauty
Hmm.
standards, right? Of course, that feels true to you because of everything that you've been told and all the media you've ever seen. And these are the messages we've gotten for so long. Um, it feels true because of all of the messages you've believed over the years,
Hmm.
many of which are just subconscious. So really examine, yes, it feels so true, but why? Who's still saying that? Who's still, you know, in my environment, in either my family, like the we were talking about the micro and macro levels, either my
Yeah.
family or my social group. What do my friends talk about? Are my friends always um oh, what's the word I'm looking for? Repeating this kind of
Hmm.
reality, so like the I keep believing it, or is it on a greater context, media, what I'm seeing on TV, do I keep hearing these messages? So, and then realizing you're bombarded with that message all the time,
Absolutely.
and that these are all outside voices, and that just because you're hearing these outside voices, a lot of the times the voices we're hearing from media is to sell us things. So
Hmm.
okay, they have their own motive for selling us these ideas so they can sell us things to fix the
Hmm.
problems, right? If they
Exactly.
if they need me to think that I'm more valuable because I'm skinny, then they've got a weight loss drug, or some kind of workout device or whatever that they can sell me. So be aware of the messages, where they're coming from, and then
Hmm.
acknowledge, yes, it's really hard to change this, but I have to just expand my perspective on it.
Exactly.
That's my
Exactly.
that's my point of view on it.
I
Elisa,
think
what do you
that's
think?
great. I think that's everything you shared is so important. The thought that I was having is, of course, in line with what you're saying, is whose beliefs are these? Because if
Mhm.
they're internalized, again, they come from somewhere else. And like with the example of the products, like someone is trying to sell us something, some people are also trying to sell us an agenda.
Absolutely.
And you have had sometimes decades of time to embody that agenda to a point that it feels true, but really that just came from embodying that one thing for so long. It's time to maybe embody something else.
Right.
And another example that came for me, I mean, we have so many clients, who are LGBTQ,
Mhm.
who have or come to us to tell us that they have internalized homophobia, for
Yes.
example.
Mhm.
And it's like, that is a perfect example of that became internalized But obviously, there's only a part of you that has internalized that, because everything else about you is completely different. Everything else about you is your true
Right.
self.
Right.
So there can be that internalized shame, but that is a perfect example of that is one part of the story that came obviously from somewhere else
That
with
was
an agenda.
conditioned. Right.
It
Yeah.
was completely conditioned. How can you coexist with that internalization and being who you are?
Right.
That is a great
Exactly.
example of that's only one. That
Mhm.
internalization is not a global truth. It's
Right.
one voice that tried to gain control by becoming internalized.
Right.
That's
Exactly.
been embodied. And as you grow, you embody a lot of other stuff.
Right.
And every once in a while, that voice might come up, but it's like, no, there's all these other things,
Right.
all these other truths that are much more powerful and much more true.
Yes.
So the typical, I am not good enough, where does that come from? How long have
Mhm.
you embodied that for?
Mhm.
What else is true?
Mhm.
You know?
Exactly.
And we're not jumping to, okay, if I leave the I am not good enough behind, suddenly I'm the greatest, the absolute best, and maybe you
Right.
are, but for us to help you find a balance in all
Right.
this so that
Right.
you don't feel that anything is overpowering.
And then when you do start thinking about that, like, okay, the truth is, because this is like this arbitrary thing, then I am not good enough. Okay, so then it comes down to how are you defining good or good enough?
Mm-hmm.
Well, you're defining good or good enough by what you've been taught, right? Is it
Yeah.
your certain skills or abilities? Is it your um, e- emotional like your EQ, your emotional IQ? Is it your right? Like, how
Mm-hmm.
are you defining this? Because that's probably a product of what you've been taught, which has been conditioned into you through our social
Exactly.
networks, society, things like that. So, right, again, like we were talking about, how do you define success? How do you define good or good enough? Right?
Mm-hmm.
So examining these things and then finding your own truth about it. What is good enough to me? What would feel good to me? Not by like what
Mm-hmm.
they all say out here in the industry or my family or whatever, but what's good enough to me? What does that mean to be
Exactly.
good to me?
Yeah. And that to any truth that you really want to embody for yourself. What is
Hmm.
true to me around this topic, this issue, this conflict? I'm
Hmm.
having this block.
Right.
What do I really believe once I silence
Hmm.
those voices for a moment and I understand where they came from?
Exactly.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So it's a process, but we definitely want to tell you that the process works. We have
It
seen it
does.
work.
Yes. Hmm.
And do those voices go away completely? Maybe not, but they lose power.
Yes.
They lose
And
power. They come and
that's
go.
the whole point, is being able to recognize the voices, know they're still there, and just not give them any power, you know. Yeah.
Exactly. Exactly. So thank you for this question.
Yeah,
You
that
were
was
going
a
to say
really
something
it's great.
else.
Oh no, I was just going to say that, it's always a process because we're continually getting the messages from,
Hmm.
in just in daily life. So it's a continual process of acknowledgement and letting go.
Yeah,
Yeah.
exactly.
But
And
anyway,
shifting power internally.
absolutely.
Yeah. So thank you all very much. We're very proud of you for thinking about these things and sitting with these difficult questions. And we want to offer you any support that you need.
Yes.
So feel free to message us at any point, and we'll see you next week.
See you next week.